I'm gonna share some stuff about training design. So what I'm going to be doing is I'll go through and actually design a workout and an annual training plan, like right now, kind of like magic trick style. But any questions? I know, um, you know, I had the lecture put up. I sent out some suggested readings. We had our discussion board, which I'm really glad everybody was really open and engaged with, just because I noticed that there were some out there that really were vulnerable with it and opened up and really shared. But wanted to know if there's any questions, like, because through with your questions, maybe I'm going to address them in a little bit, and maybe I can elaborate on those things, or like details you really want to know that if I don't have the information, at least I can be like, hey, Bompa and this chapter or this research article, check this out. This is some great information. If you really want to get into like the nitty gritty of it all, or if you just have general questions about maybe terminology and how I maybe interchange some terminology, definitely want to know that. And just so as we can all discuss it and maybe share our insights together. Anybody have any questions? Brave souls. You don't have to raise your hand or anything. Just go ahead and just
I
figure it
think
out.
a question that I have is when you're, say you have like a theme of your mesocycle, and
Yeah.
you're trying to figure out like how to really distribute, like how often you emphasize that, like in your weekly microcycles. How do you typically go around that? Like kind of what's your starting point? And if you kind of talk us through your process with that.
About designing the themes for the microcycles.
Yeah, I think like in kind of distributing like your so say like you're doing a mesocycle, your focus is like acceleration or just some or insert whatever you want, and then trying to make sure that you are like fitting that in your microcycles, like with still being able to train like the other things that you have to focus on. If you're working with like a 400-meter runner and you're trying to train acceleration, but you know that you still need to be doing some kind of like lactate capacity or something along those lines, like how do you kind of make sure that you're checking all the boxes on a weekly basis?
A big thing for me is, and yeah, I'm going to go over that. So I'm glad you asked that. It's almost like I paid you to help segue me. But what I do personally is I use my warm ups to tackle some of those little intricacies that maybe that I'm not emphasizing, like mobility and, sometimes like the different components of mobility. Like, I want to keep, maybe we were really good at, getting our athletes real coordinated and things like that. I'm going to use my warm up to help kind of keep my finger in that jar kind of thing. I'm going to keep me kind of in touch with maybe the power segment. Maybe we built up this great power segment. Now we're going to be going to like eccentric strength and speed and reaction and really kind of bust open that nervous system. I'm going to maybe do some med ball throws in the beginning of my warm up just to keep the power element there. And it's very unique, especially when you're talking about metabolic stuff. Like you're trying to get into, maybe you're getting into special speed endurance where you're really getting into like that lactic type workout. Well, and you don't want to maybe lose some of the acceleration components. That's where you're, like I said, you're either using the warm up or using cool downs and active recovery days. Like maybe an active recovery day is like marches with a sled. So like it's kind of a down day, but you're doing marches with a sled to work on posture, to make sure you're reinforcing some of those acceleration mechanics. Maybe, whatever the case may be, like using those drills can really help kind of help you not get too far away from home, to where they don't lose maybe all those really great things that you help foster and build. Like with those different elements and those biomotor abilities, like with the speed, coordination, flexibility, and strength. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you, that's helpful.
Yeah, no, that's good. Any other questions or insights that anybody wants to share or like wants to kind of, get more information on or elaborate on? Everybody go at once. So everybody's, perfect, knows everything, got it, figured it out, cracked the code. Well, I'm going to need your guys' help in this next part anyway. So I'm going to go and I'm going to talk about how I design training. Okay. And when I talk about how I design training, I try to take in as much as I possibly can with athletes. Sometimes, you know, a lot of coaches um, might disagree with me, or this is where it becomes a little iffy um, with coaches because coaching's hard. And, you know, like then they hear me talk about training design. They're like, for every athlete, I have 20 athletes. It's like, yeah, maybe you can kind of box in athlete A, you know, or athlete, 19 and 20. You can kind of put them in the same training plan, or they can almost be doing the same training plan, but with different nuances because they're different individuals. And training designs and plans have to be individualized and taken into consideration because a lot of times they, especially like middle school or high school coaches kind of blow it off and be like, yeah, you're talking about college and elite. Like, we don't have time to do that. We got 100 kids. Like, how do I even do that? Well, it's possible. Like, I've coached high school. I've been in those realms and worked with youth clubs and stuff. You can create, almost what we would consider individualized training plans, but it kind of just create little specific nuances based on the talent and, specifics for the athlete. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Um, and what I'm going to be doing is kind of so can everybody see it now? Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay. So this is something that's in the Google Drive, and everybody has access to it or whatever. And I'm trying to see here. So what this is just pretty much like, okay, somebody give me a name for an athlete. Jeremy, what's the athlete's name?
Nick.
Nick. Good old Nick. Jenna, what event?
Forever to unmute. Let's do a multi.
Ooh, Hepburn. Yeah, so it's a decathlete. All right. Deb, what does? How old is this deck that we're working with?
I'm sorry, what did you, how old is what?
How old is this decathlete that we're working with?
How old? Let's make him a sophomore in high school.
Ooh, so what is that? 15, 16? All right, sweet. So we have our high school decathlete. So when I'm doing this, I'm going to take an assessment of Nick. We're going into the year. And I'm like, all right, Nick, we're getting ready for our season. And whether I've worked with him before or not, what I want to take into consideration are all these different elements. I want to take in who is helping me with this whole thing, right? And also it could be like who's going to be in your way, but more importantly, who's going to be helping you. Do you have some of us might have an athletic trainer or, for sports physio. We might have access to a sports psychologist and a chiropractor and maybe a strength and conditioning person, or we have to collaborate with their basketball coach or their baseball coach. They might do different sports. Who, and their parents, obviously, because they're under 18. Who are we collaborating with? So who's going to all be involved in this whole thing besides the athlete and yourself? You have to take that in consideration. That's so important. You have to know who your team is. And I use that to say, a couple little things on my soapbox. Coaches, stay in your lane. There's a lot of coaches that are massaging athletes and shouldn't be massaging athletes. Okay, just be careful of that, and maybe giving athletes advice on nutritional supplements, right? And you're not a nutritionist or a registered dietitian. Okay, so though we can maybe make recommendations that so they can go to their physician or whatever to get prescribed certain medications, whatever. But we just definitely have to stay in our lane with those specific, more delicate nuances. And I want to say this as well, that if you don't have a sports psychologist, if you're like college or high school, there's somebody that studied sports psychology in your area. And though you think you might have a good idea about because you took a sports psychology class, whatever it is, even if you were a great sports psychologist, you probably shouldn't be working with your athlete. You should have somebody else working with him. And having that team, having that external person, especially now we're talking about a decathlete, right? Somebody he's going to be dealing with 10 different disciplines. How are we going to do that? Well, helping them get mentally prepared and things is going to be important. So if you just Google, there's ASEP is the Association of Applied Sports Psychologists. You can look that up and find one in your area. And I guarantee you, these people just love to work with athletes. They would love to work with your athletes. And, Some of them, most of them will do it for super cheap or free. And maybe you can create a partnership or some kind of, arrangement. I remember when I was coaching at Compton, I had a sports psychologist coming through, but I didn't have a big budget, right? What I did is I said, hey, when we have fun runs and stuff, you can get it for free. And that was enough for him. And, those kind of things, you just have to figure it out and be creative. But ultimately, what you're doing is you're looking at all who's going to be involved. Then you're going to have a prognosis of the future type of athlete. Is this individual looking for a scholarship? Okay, yes. Who do we need to be involved in? What kind of time frame do we need to operate in? Because we got to keep those things in mind. That's going to help us prioritize our workouts. Here in Southern California, the Arcadia Multi is the big high school multi, right? So you just have to know what the big meet is and what the big competition is and what the end game is for this individual athlete. For this athlete, it's not going to be the high school state championship. It's probably going to be like Junior Olympics or somewhere so we can get college exposure. So then we're going to look at prognosis of the method. Okay, how am I going to go about this? When I start thinking about my training plan, and I'm going to show you guys a template for an annual plan in a second, we have to make sure that we start from the end, work our way back. So what I'm going to be looking at is loads, especially for my decathletes, heptathletes. I don't do those lactic type workouts. I probably do 7 of them a year, if that. Even for my super monster studs, those booty lock workouts, okay, for track people, right? Those workouts that make you crawl kind of thing, okay? Those workouts, I'm not doing more than 7 of them, and that's for a top end athlete. I'm probably, and I'm not doing them anywhere near 15 days out of a major competition, because the cortisol levels of these athletes, especially like a high school young man like this, where testosterone is just, so inconsistent. I'm looking at, okay, maybe, this booty lock workouts, I have to plan those in, and I'm probably going to do my last one about 15 days outside of that major competition. Anytime within that 15 days, I'm not going to be certain that the cortisol levels are down. Elite athletes were able to do blood tests daily, weekly, whatever, and I can find out, okay, are the cortisol levels high? Is the stress high? Is the demand too high? Because what happens is if your body's operating at too high of a function, that the chance of getting hurt or getting sick, increases. So we have to keep our athletes' health in consideration. I have some athletes that don't have good adaptation. So as I factor in the load, they don't adapt well. I'm going into the extreme, but I have elite athletes. I have a decathlete who's the national record holder for Haiti, and he has the neuromuscular, adaptation of Dory in Finding Nemo. Okay, we have a great workout. We try to come back the next day, and it's like I never taught it to him. It's like we never did that drill or that workout ever before. Some athletes do not adapt well, so you have to figure out who they are, because we might have to introduce things at a higher frequency, and that's where the adaptation comes in. I have some athletes, I teach it once to them, I can bring it up 3 years later and they know how to do it perfectly. They're that talented, skilled, or gifted. So adaptation is important. You have to assess their level of adaptation. Then recovery is going to be individual too. My last top end heptathlete, I know if I gave her a day off and we tried to work out the next day, it was trash. She could not, she needed recovery, but she could not take a day off and then come do a very hard hurdle workout because she just wouldn't be responsive. So I had she had to do stuff constantly, but not a lot, because her tolerance for volume was really low. So she couldn't handle a lot of volume. So I had to manage those things. So how do your athletes recover? If you did deadlifts and they come back and they're still sore 2 days later, okay, that's something to consider. Their nutrition and how they sleep, those are other components of it, but you have to keep that in mind about their lifestyle. Then competition. How do you get them ready for competition and how you plan out their competitions? High school is weird, because you'll do a dual meet and then you'll come back that weekend and do an invitational. Okay, the advice I give to coaches that have those kind of settings is that use the dual meet as like a high intensity training opportunity, and then just kind of flow and put your emphasis on the invitationals, because that's where the stress is going to be the most. Usually the dual meets and stuff don't have a lot of stress. So that level of stress is going to impact competition. And if you stress them out, they're going to break, and it's going to be really hard for them to kind of get out of that. You'll see athletes plateau, like have a great mid-season, just like be like monster. You're like, oh wow, if we keep this training up, they're going to kill it at the end of the year. Well, they're going to plateau just because of the psychological stress that's placed upon them from not allowing them to, kind of recover psychologically from having so many different competitions. Like, if you look at, if any of you guys coach collegiately, if you looked at like cross-country schedules, like if the top end cross-country teams, they probably only compete 4 times, So this decathlete, he's probably only going to do maybe 2 or 3 decathlons. So he's a sophomore, right? So he's probably new to it. He's only going to do maybe 2 or 3, and that's it. And so, that's how I'm planning those competitions. Psychologically, you have to make sure we're training and preparing our athletes psychologically as it relates to how we design our practices. Self-control is important. Are these athletes really good at, or are they going to help develop themselves, their autonomy? So like, say this decathlete is kind of a head case, right? I have to almost micromanage this individual because they're a head case. They're somebody that gets psyched out easily. They get distracted easily. I mean, you name it, okay, whatever kind of head case, whatever you're thinking of, just think about that, and how you deal with that is that, okay, now I have to make sure that everything we do is in a controlled environment and is self-paced, and I actually am prescribing everything. No level of autonomy is going to be relocated to this athlete. Ongoing control and stage control, you just have to watch and prepare your athletes and see how they step up to competition. Some athletes blame it, or some coaches blame it on athletes, like say, oh man, my athlete choked. No, they didn't choke. You just didn't prepare them, and as coaches, like, we got you, it's 1,000% your fault, whatever happens, right? And I tell my athletes that, and I go, hey, if something doesn't go well, it's 1,000% my fault. And if you do really well, then you get all the credit because you executed, you took advantage of it, you listened, you followed through, and big ups to you. But if something goes wrong, that's on me, right? Because if you're not teaching it, you're letting it happen. So with stage control, we're putting our athletes in situations in practice, like, how are you preparing them? I hear some high school coaches don't even let their athletes don't even see a pair of blocks until they get to the competition. That's scary. I couldn't imagine, not seeing a pair of blocks till I get to practice, but that's common because getting out blocks, you got a bunch of kids and you're dealing with those kids in the blocks, and it's hard to manage. I get it, but you have to figure out something to help create that level of relationship between training and competition. Okay. And so when I'm going to look at this decathlete's load, and I'm going to show you guys very specifically in a little bit, like different training programs. So the technical preparation, so you have to have all your technical models together. How I do my combined event athletes is I'm going to make sure I have commonality. So I'm going to do drills and certain workouts that are going to be similar in each of the different events, like the jumping events, right? Rhythm and approach, okay? Position at takeoff. And also, the dexterity you're going to need for the execution of that takeoff. So I'm going to make sure I train those things in isolation. So when we get to that point and we do that technical modeling in whatever technique or event I'm having them do, that I don't have to reintroduce it, that we've already kind of gone over like the preliminary phases of each technical preparation. For like the 100 meters, I love this with the 100 meters because a lot of people don't, initially, if you're not used to track and field, you think that there's not a lot of technique in the 100 meters when, I mean, it's stupid technical in regards to angles. And I'm talking about at the higher levels, the faster you want to run, the margin of error is you're talking about centimeters between, body angle, body position, force application, ground contact, like what kind of force are you applying to the ground? So technical modeling is critical in every event, even in, and I'll kind of do this for my distance or mid-distance people out there. like for the 800 or 1500 for my decathletes. We don't do 1500 meter work for my decathletes. And I've had decathletes run as fast as 424, 429, 430. I've had athletes run 207, 211, 213. So, I mean, those are pretty decent times for combined event people. And well, maybe we might do a rhythm run here and there, but we don't put a lot of emphasis on those workouts. What I put a lot of emphasis on is running economy. So technique wise for distance and mid distance people, you have to look at running economy, where their foot strike is, where their hips are, their posture, their arm carry, and how they're carrying themselves as it relates from stride to stride. And also like Valsalva or breathing techniques and different types of methods of like, I learned this from it was, oh man, what is it called? A respiratory therapist. And I didn't know there was so much involved in breathing, like, and how to like expand and open up. And there's so many techniques and things involved. And so those are the techniques as relates in technical modeling that we'll talk about for like the distance or mid distance. So the preliminary phase, main phase, and then final phase. When we talk about those, like if they've never done it, we have to look at it from preliminary. We have to do introduction. So they're going to be doing it in a holistic way. Then the main phase is that they're going to be doing it, but we might break up segments and kind of do that whole teaching pedagogy of whole part whole. And then the final phase is that now we're doing a lot of mirroring. So what I do a lot with my high end athletes is we do technical mirroring. What is that? It's like slow, boring, right? They're just kind of like, it's almost like you're mimicking it in slow motion, right? You're kind of just copying and kind of walking through using a lot of visualization because ultimately it's about being able to correlate psychologically the sensation of what it is to be at that point. I'm not going to do that with an introduction athlete. Why? Because they don't even know what the heck they're doing. They haven't done it enough to know what doing it right even feels like. Okay, so even with the distance runners and things like that, we're doing a lot of that final phase type stuff. So tactical preparation, I love tactical stuff, and so hopefully we can maybe get into it towards the end of the class. But I love like events like high jump and I'll talk about it. That's a very specific event where you can like out coach another coach, where it's like you and this other coach, because bar height, opening height, pole selection, are you going to skip a bar or not? Like these are all things that you're thinking about as it relates to tactically preparing for the race. Yeah, okay, for you distance people like 10K, 5K, are you getting out and all that stuff? Like I love, and correct me if I misquote, but it was Prefontaine, right? He said that pretty much, I'm summarizing because I don't know the quote verbatim, but he said he wasn't the most talented person, but he was the toughest kind of thing. I forget what the exact quote is, but that was his tactic. He tactically prepared himself to just kind of gut people out of the race. And that can be a method, right? Though maybe a little abstract at times, but how are you tactically preparing your athlete? And you have to talk to him about that. When you're preparing this decathlete or heptathlete for high jump, I'm talking to him about, you got to be consistent at this opening height. You have to make sure your approach is dialed in. And what happens if it's on your last jump? Because in a combined event, in a decathlon or heptathlon, height, that's 0 points. And I mean, that is make or break. That just really takes you out of the game. So no height is like not an option. So what do you do if it's your last attempt at opening height? How do you psychologically and physically, because you can't deny that there's going to be nerves there, right? If your athlete gets to the starting line or gets to that last jump and they have nerves and that anxiety kicks in, you have to tactically prepare them for those kind of scenarios and talk to them about it and help them realize that anxiety, that nervousness, that sweaty palms and all that kind of fight or flight mechanism kicking in, that's all good stuff. That's all like your superpowers kicking in, for little kids or whatever. So that's how we're going to do that. We're going to tactically prepare and talk to our athletes through those different things. Psychologically prepare, we're going to talk about then reflection, because courage is important because we're going to be asking them to get out of their comfort zone. Then reflection is good because it's going to help them think back and be able to honestly assess what they did. I love video now because it's like, hey, you didn't use your arms. Like, yes, I did. And it's like, all right, well, let's look at the video, right? And then it shows that they didn't use their arms. Willpower to be able to get out of a hole. And so these are all psychological things that we as coaches have to prep them with. The physical stuff, like flexibility, you can teach that, and it goes day to day. Like I talked about, agility. We don't usually do a lot of lateral movements in track and field. I think that we're doing our young ladies a disservice because of that. So we really have to make sure that we're including some bit of lateral work, especially early season. We don't want to get into special speed endurance and stuff until we build acceleration. So those are just like some of the training elements we'll get into. The recovery, like I said, active recovery. So like whether it's just like jogging, swimming, riding a bike, stretching, doing some light jump rope, all that can be good. And then I'll go into stage control, I think a little bit later when I get into sports psychology. So those are some elements. Any questions on some of those elements that relate to, kind of how I break down and like, this is not in a book. I just wrote this stuff out. I actually use this year in, day in, month by month. I use this exact template to, develop training for my athletes. And what it has done for me personally is it's helped me keep track of my athletes too. Because some athletes, year to year, I want to see, okay, did we get better at certain things? And okay, what do we need to emphasize on? Did we prepare ourselves for these types of things? It really kind of gives us a deeper, perspective of where we're headed. But yeah, any questions on any of that stuff? I know I kind of went through it quick, but wanted to definitely share kind of some stuff that I do.
What does it look like when you fill that out? Like if you were going to actually use that template and put some of those things in, like what would it look like for you to put like an example note in one of those boxes?
I print it out. I mean, I'm old school. I write everything. So like, if you look around like my office and stuff, I have like, I just write everything. So all that stuff, like I write out. I manually write all that out. Yeah. So, but what is it like? I just write next to the side of it. I put little notes. I actually make it bigger because I'm blind, so I need it. So sometimes it's a longer sheet for me, but that's kind of what I use. So I just write next to it. And some stuff might not be relevant. It might not be relevant to you or what you do or how you think. And that's the beauty of it, is it relates to it maybe being a template about developing your athlete profile before you develop your annual plan. Because it's going to make you think about things that you might take for granted with your athlete, especially if it's an athlete you've been working with for a while. It's so easy to take things for granted. I know I kind of mentioned this before, but like I had a bounce back young lady, and like I said, like I thought she was going to be a monster, but she had some big marks. I'm like, oh man, she knows how to do these drills, she knows how to do this stuff because she's achieved this. And in actuality, like she didn't know how to do anything. I knows how to like reteach her or some stuff like from the very beginning. So that's kind of, that's why I say like I just kind of handwrite it and whatever's relevant for the time.
You mentioned the individual training and whatnot. Is there a set kind of max ideal group, right? Everyone has a training partner per se, but do you say like no more than 4, no more than X amount? What's your recommendation?
I think, in terms of training groups, I mean, I would always recommend like kind of thinking, I like 5s and 10s as it relates to like groups, but it just depends on the talent, like it's because it can be really discouraging for somebody that's developing and maybe can't hit the same interval time as somebody else, right? Especially if they're new to the sport. And I noticed this, and maybe I'm wrong, and I don't want to come off a certain type of way, but I noticed with my young ladies that they compare themselves to the other young ladies like right away. Like, I'm not good because look at them. I'm like, no. That she's number 1 in the nation. Like, you don't look over there. You say hi, but don't even think about that, right? Because I'm not any good, and that just happens. So you have to kind of balance that out too. Like you might have an athlete that I had this young man. I named him Kip Kino. I kind of pulled him off the streets. He was and he never trained before, but he was a monster. He can do anything. I wish he would have panned out, but he just was first day he was running in, I think, Jordans, and he was a freaking monster. He can do any workout with anybody. We had 46, quarter milers. He was like, for the first majority of the work, he was right there with him. He never worked out before. And so like you have varying levels. So like just kind of, especially the mental, or the emotional and self-image, like you got to keep that in mind. I think those are probably more important than actual like physical things. Because some athletes, you need to actually help them build their confidence, and some like you need to help push them out of their comfort zone so they realize that they can actually do it. So yeah, I think that is probably more of an indicator for me than anything. But I mean, anything more than 10, what ends up happening is that you're definitely going to be having some too big of a disparaging type of talent and mindset to get outside of 10. Any other questions about training? Like, I was going to pull up like an annual plan and stuff, but before I do that, it relates to like how you do training plans and based on like him. Have I said anything? You're like, you're nuts. You're off. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't do it that way, or something that you're like, prove it kind of thing, or anything like that. Just because a lot of us come from different backgrounds, different schools of thought. So just want to kind of see if there's anybody that has anything that might be a little bit different than what I, kind of maybe discussed or talked about.
Are you talking about different type of training plans?
Yeah, like how do you go about training and things like that?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
Thought you was looking for us to like share maybe a training plan that we've used in the past or something like that.
Yeah, no, that'd be great too. If there's somebody wants to share a training plan and um, something that they do that they're like um, like they want insight on or something like that.
I mean, I can let you look at mine and let you critique it.
Yeah, yeah, no, that'd be good.
I had to pull it up.
While he's pulling that up, anybody have any questions or anything as it relates to um, like a training plan or like how you develop your workouts and stuff?
Yeah, I had a clarifying question. So when you were screen sharing earlier, you mentioned that we don't do a whole lot of lateral movement, regularly stuff like that. You mentioned that being a disservice to our female athletes. I was kind of curious why you feel like our girls need to be coached in agility a little bit more, or why we should incorporate those kinds of drills.
Yeah. I would say like lateral stuff. Like, I mean, I'm talking, I'm really emphasizing like, especially like combined event athletes and field event athletes, just because I noticed that, ACL injuries and things like that, there's not a lot of the adductor complexes being developed to help support, some of the hamstring issues that might occur, or those lower extremity injuries that happen through the perineal and the ACL. Also, with some tightening within the lower back and stuff, that's usually because of like from the hips, they're not allowing what we would consider like the piriformis to be relaxed through exercises and through doing lateral movements. That's going to help engage and disengage that piriformis, and as it relates to being, as a prime mover with some of the things that we do in track and field, especially like I said, for those speed power athletes. So it's going to help not only develop like the supporting muscle groups, right, but also help teach to disengage those antagonistic muscle groups, like I talked about with the lower back and that piriformis.
Okay. All right. Yeah, Nick, that was good. Appreciate it.
I'm ready for
Quincy. Do you have your workout ready to share? You have it?
I got something. So I'll just click share screen.
Yeah.
Hold it. All right, share screen. Can you see that?
There we go. Yep.
So this is what I use for our print group, and this was the Corona shortened season. So up top is the actual track meets, and the date below. Our periods. Of course, GPP is general preparation phase, specific preparation phase, and competition phase. My mesio cycles, I break them down in 4 weeks, and I separate how I train the short sprinters and the long sprinters. So when you see mesio cycle theme, that's short sprinter. LS is long sprinter. And then the microcycles, of course, weekly down here. 24, 25 weeks. And then as I get into the season and training, I'll write down, I know in my head in the GPP phase, I want to be at a certain intensity, but I don't write that in because my seniors, juniors and seniors are going to be at a different intensity from the 9th grader coming in. And then I have some 9th graders that been running club for 5 years, so they don't need to do the lower intensity like plyos. They can go straight into the like higher intensity training that the juniors and seniors are doing, and with the weightlifting as well. So this is kind of like a total snapshot of how I do my annual template.
Sweet. And it's, can you guys hear me a little bit better? I kind of took my mic thing off my AirPods. I don't know if the audio.
Yeah, that's a lot, but you was coming in a little distorted some. I thought it was my internet. I don't know. I don't have
I've been on Zoom all day, like literally all day. So my computer's probably tired of Zoom right now. But no, I like that. And you kind of said something, and I just want to kind of point it out just to help prompt discussion too, and look at it. Like you mentioned that maybe your more advanced athletes aren't doing plyos as an introduction to like in higher intensity type stuff. Why is that?
Well, they're doing plyos. They're just doing higher intensity plyos. So I would like just say, for instance, with the Olympic lifts, or when I'm going for absolute strength. Like you can see in my first phase of the GPP, I got that absolute power is absolute power. So we're in the weight room. Instead of my juniors and seniors that been lifting with me for 3 years, they don't have to come in and go through the first 3 weeks of learning how to position yourself, how to jerk, how to clean. They don't have to do that. They go straight into the higher intensity lifts, the jerks, the cleans, snatches, when I'm doing that. So my younger athletes, they wouldn't be at that intensity. They would have just the bar. They would just have the bar over there. So all of their workouts would be low intensity. And like for plyos, instead of doing bounds, they'll be doing like hops, like little small ankle hops, pushing from the ankle. And then my juniors and seniors might be doing tuck jumps, prisoner squats, things like that. So higher intensity stuff straight in from the training versus, Joe Blow off the street just walking out to me, hey, Coach Q, I want to join the track team. Okay, well, I'm not going to put him over there with the juniors and seniors doing tuck jumps and hurdle hops and hurdle mobility. He gonna come in at an introductory phase.
Oh, perfect. And that's the thing too. Like you see that, and it's very traditional to kind of break up microcycles into weeks. And as you get like more elite or higher level athletes, or athletes that you have like a longer training history with, you'll notice that maybe I've gone as low as like 3-day microcycles and as many as 10-day microcycles. So how do you extend those, and why do you extend them? It is because of the emphasis and adaptation at that point in time. And if you're talking about Dade County in Miami, right, Quincy?
Yeah, we in Miami.
Okay, yeah, no, that's yeah, they're running out there, I think, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I might be
training
mistaken,
now.
but
We're training now. I just left, my girls, we were training. We did hill workouts today. So,
yeah.
and then we don't know if
Wow.
we're going to have a season or not, but, they say start the training because our superintendent is pushing for athletics.
And your state meets in middle of May.
The state meet, yeah, is in the middle of May, and then and this is just for the high school season. We go immediately. I give them like a week, a total week recovery, and then we come back in week 26 or 27 and just reset the entire calendar, because you got the AAU and the USATF summer season with the club track. So I let and that's a lot of the development with the 9th and 10th graders. Some of the seniors and juniors, they don't want to do it anymore, but it's almost like a mandatory thing for my 9th and 10th graders, because I want them to
In
continue.
Florida, you got to sprint. You do sprint or play football. There's no option.
Develop. Or some of them, they get confidence because they freshmen, they 14, 15, and they've been running against seniors getting blowed out all year. But then they run AAU and they run against other 14-year-olds. So now they're like, oh, well, I'm better than I thought I was. So that's a good thing. That's why I like to keep them in there when you mention like building their confidence and their psyche.
Sweet. I'm gonna hop on and share my screen real quick. Just go here because I thought this was pretty funny because you guys picked it, and I just thought this was really funny because I knew I had something, but I had a decathlete who I started training. I worked with him in high school. His name was Nick. Like that was, and this was his annual plan. Like, yeah, it's pretty funny. That, like, I was like, that sounds so familiar, like a decathlete named Nick. But yeah, like, I mean, when I talk about magic trick, like I have to plan that out again and not make it a coincidence. But I'm gonna plan that out next time I either teach this class or do another clinic or something. I might have to pay some people to stage and do this one. But like, and I put like, if you look here, I kind of broke up the weeks that he's going to be emphasizing different drums, and I had to look at what are his weaknesses, and I had to really hone in on what his weaknesses were, and also look at what his strengths were. We did a lot of testing at certain very key points in time in the season, just because obviously through the high school season, they wanted him to do like weird stuff like 300 hurdles, which is like this weird, ridiculous event that they have in high school that means almost nothing. That's just my opinion. But, so they made him run the 300 hurdles, so we had to account for all those things. But his end goal was to be the Junior Olympic, the Junior Olympic All-American or whatever, and hopefully win it. And so we had to look past the high school season. So if you look, a lot of our general phase was super stretched out just because there was so much I had to prepare for him and also kind of get him ready as relates to that extended season. So yeah, I just thought I wanted to share that real quick too, just before we kind of start wrapping up. Yeah, like I'm kind of just, seeing this, and I apologize for being distorted. I got to figure out what's going on with my sound. But hopefully through when I was talking about that, that progression of training, that hopefully you guys got the gist of it. So, and hopefully it might even be like a little bit of reiteration from the presentation, but yeah, just kind of wanted to see, if you guys had questions or wanted to share like workout stuff or had ideas or, just wanted more insight, wanted to get deeper on anything or wanted because like this right here, I think we kind of gone over what I would consider a little bit like grassroots and maybe getting out a little bit, but this is definitely, I would consider like starting point at the very least. But if anybody wants to get deeper or has any deeper questions, like with how to involve the physio stuff and neural impulse development for speed athletes, whatever the case may be, I think this would be a good time to kind of have those discussions.
Have you, just looking at that, what you shared, Nick's training plan, like the actual one, Coach,
Mhm.
the amount that you plot there, like what you're actually training, we usually do that, but we don't do it in a form. Have you always done it like that detailed in the form where you're ticking off the boxes so you can see? Usually I'm writing it on the whiteboard, like, okay, we touched special endurance, 1-2 weeks ago, so we need to touch it again here, and timing out days. But it seems like you're able to keep everything nice and tight there for the whole season.
Yeah, because I mean, like I said, I'm trying to look at big picture because I don't want to miss anything. And
Yeah.
then I kind of zoom in, and then I can kind of come back and, okay, does this even make sense? And
Yeah.
your experience, right, and your knowledge of that athlete individually is going to help you kind of make sense of these things. Like, and that's why I try to get a lot of, I can't take this, and a lot of you guys realize this. I can't take Nick's plan and go give it to Johnny, and just because they're the same age and they do the same event, it's just not going to work, right? They're just different. And so I do this just because, like my ADD and stuff kick in, and I can get super excited about things and just be all over the place. But this kind of helps me kind of stay, because I'm constantly thinking about track and workouts and drills, and I'm writing stuff down, but okay, all right, let me come back home. What's important? What are the priorities? And then I kind of helps me kind of stay on track a little bit.
Okay. Thank you.
Especially with multis, like I get way going. I get in the deep end, and I don't have no floaties, and I can't swim, so sometimes I get way out there. But yeah, I like this. Like I like, and this is how I was indoctrinated too, right? You got to remember that. Like this is not new. That template is not something I created. Like I stole that. Like I stole most. Like this is what you do as track coaches. We steal stuff and we try to figure it out and how we can use it. So this is just something, like I said, I was indoctrinated with, and it helps me. And I make adjustments. Like that doesn't make sense to me, and then I add stuff and I subtract stuff and make stuff fit for how I teach and coach. Like I saw like Quincy's, right? He started spring track and field, and you know for me I'm going like August, right? But for him, he's like, realistically, I got to look at it like I'm starting them in December, because they might not be in my class, or they're coming from football, or all those different variations. So you have to make it specific to whatever you're um, being dealt with.
I had a question about your phase planning. Um, is there a certain percentage that you're using for your GPP phase as it pertains to the amount of weeks you'll be training the athlete, or is it just according to your athletic calendar?
Yeah, like I love volume. Like volume to me is like gold. Like how can I build volume? And I think about it, and this might not even make sense, but this is how I see it. If I want a really big peak, right? I got to build a big foundation for that pyramid.
Right.
And I mean, that's all your general prep stuff. That's all this. If I can spend, but like if you're dealing with kids, they're gonna get boring doing general prep, and they want to go to the meets. My elite athletes, right? I'm like, I don't care what you think or what you feel. Put your emotions to the side, or put them in a bag. I don't care, right? But my high school kids, like in freshmen in college, like they want to compete early, they want to compete often. Okay, so that pyramid bottom is going to be real, kind of tight, and so it does have an impact on that peak. So the bigger volume, or the more volume you can create and work capacity through that general prep phase, you're going to have a big peak. And you got to even look at it from like a career standpoint. So I'm taking like people that want to be, we're looking 4 years out for the Olympics, right? Like what does that look like? And high school season, I got them in spring and straight meets in January to May. Like what does that look like? And so and that's the thing. Like that's why I love volume. I love work capacity. I find great value in it. And that general phase is something that a lot of coaches get out of too quickly because they want to get sexy too early, right? They want to do all the cool stuff that looks good on Instagram or makes the athletes happy, and might even produce like some quick microwave results at a early bodunk meet. Like that's their prerogative. But When you brought up, I don't think you intended to bring that up and get me all excited about general prep, but that's just what
God
you did. Yeah. I don't know if I even answered your question. I'm thinking back, but like I think I did.
Yeah, I'm
And
just saying, like, when I mean, when I first got into coaching, and it was a guy that was telling me about the general prep, and I was learning about it. He was suggesting that um, the general prep be at least 30% of your training calendar. So I'm like, I heard it, like you say, we steal stuff. I heard it, used it, planned it, and it, I didn't. I don't kind of look at it now like by percentages, but I know that a lot of coaches do.
yeah,
So I was just asking you if
if
you
you have the luxury of making it 30% or more, then do it. If you don't have the luxury, like they got to get ready for this invite because they got to get a qualifying mark to get to league, and then to get the league, they get to regionals. Like they got to do this. I got them in January or December. I don't have 30%.
Mhm.
You know, you're doing them a disservice. Anything less than 10%, I guess you can say, if you're, and you can compete while you're in general prep phase. Like a lot of people think that it's just, that grind, that dull, workout stuff. You can have competitions while you're doing general prep,
Right.
but you just have to realize what your emphasis are and make sure your athletes are mature enough to understand that you might get a couple, licks while you go to these meets. That's just what it is. Like, trust the process.
With me, it's the parents.
Oh yeah, no, I hate parents.
It's the
Yeah,
parents. Oh my God, my child was
yeah.
running up two last year. Now
I
she's
don't even
running.
like myself as a parent, of an athlete. Like that's just what it is.
I
It's
try to.
hard. It's hard because you don't see it with the same lenses. Like you're trying to argue like logic with emotion at that point, and there's no winning. So yeah, good luck with the parents.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and then after a while, like your results speak for themselves. Like I used to have to justify workouts. Now I just say, Google, like look it up. Like I should, results. Like I mean, who's gonna argue with results?
Hmm.
But okay, people still do. Okay, I can name 5 athletes off the top of my hand that were top recruits, Division I recruits, that all transferred in the last 2 years because they wanted to do their own workouts despite the results of that Division I coach that they signed with. Okay, so I'm not going to name names like USC or Oregon or Texas. I'm not going to name programs. Okay, but I'm just saying, like people
Jordan.
left. These athletes went in and they didn't want to get out of their own way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good luck with the parents, man. That's
I I don't want to because I'm a track nut, so I'll have you up in here all night talking track.
yeah. But yeah, any other questions? Anything like I mean, I mean, for me, this has been good because I've kind of taken in quite a bit, but I want to make sure we're at least having dialogue and everybody's getting kind of what they're at least thinking throughout the week, kind of off their chest, and maybe validating what you've been thinking, or maybe reinforce what you've been thinking, whatever the case may be. No, nothing. Oh man. All right.
I'll ask a
Well,
question. I'll ask another one. Might as well. I've been talking to a bunch of different coaches, and I coach collegiately. So cross country for us is at best postponed, at worst canceled for NCAA Division II. So I was asking, speaking of general prep and extending, and do we still do like a double peak for, a distance athlete? Typically we peak for NCAA West regionals, and then we peak for kind of like early May, hoping to hit, some big marks, getting them to nationals. Are you still having, your distance athletes do a double peak?
no,
No.
no. I mean, I'm excited because we have a lot of freshmen, and I'm like, we're doing a lot of really cool stuff with like functional movement with a lot of these kids. And the sad thing is, like, I haven't even seen some of my recruits, so, but like a double peak is I mean, because there's so many variables with a double macro cycle that there's things I can't control, and so I don't trust it. So I wouldn't even think about it. And it's a great thing not to have a double macro cycle. Double macro cycles are bad things. Like, I think sometimes we think that they're good things, but they're bad things. The best coach I've ever seen do it is the distance coach at Oklahoma State. He had a guy, he had a group of guys and girls that were peaking at cross country. Then they would kind of train through indoors and then maybe try to peak, for track, but kind of train through track and then really set them up for indoors and outdoor track. And then he had another group, maybe red shirt, and then they were, they kind of ran all the, just trained all the way through cross country. They might have competed or not, but then they try to kill it in track. And so like he was cycling his cycles with his athletes. I mean, he had that luxury, but double macro cycles actually take more out of the tank. You have to have some deep level investment. You have some deep pockets as it relates to like investment and training to really get the true benefits of a double macro cycle. Yeah.
Thank you.
Kind of going on a similar theme of just like obviously less than optimal conditions as we're like trying to get back into it. What are some of the things that you as a coach be prioritizing and just working with athletes, like in my context, high school athletes, a lot of them have been kind of on their own for the last like 6 months and doing like things that they can do with limited access. And now we're like getting back to training. So like, what are some of the things that you'd be prioritizing for speed and power athletes?
I'm like functional movement, working on those little small idiosyncrasies because when the athlete gets hurt, it's not on accident.